My name is Dan Willis. As a top secret military witness who testified in Washington, D.C., I'm showing my observations and opinions in this presentation of why I believe the public has not been made aware of the technologies of the secret space programs, and as a consequence, why we've not been able to advance to a greater technological level due to our perceptions being manipulated to hide this reality. My background. I was raised on a Marine Corps air station. My father was a career Marine who served in World War II against the Nazis and in the Korean War. In 1948, President Truman awarded him a presidential citation for his extraordinary efforts during the war. Growing up as a child in the 1950s, I was intrigued by science fiction movies such as The Day the Earth Stood Still and Forbidden Planet, showing advanced technologies of flying saucers and beings from other worlds. This left an impact on me on how incredible it would be to be able to learn so much from exchanges with advanced cultures thousands of years ahead of us. But for a young mind, this was only considered science fiction fantasy, right? I honestly imagined in the 1950s that in the future, by the year 2000, that we'd be experiencing amazing technologies of anti-gravity cars and traveling to other planets and so much more. But as we all know, here in the year 2022, that never was allowed to happen. In 1963, just 10 days after President Kennedy sent a top secret memo to the CIA to release the UFO files, he was assassinated, and Lyndon B. Johnson reversed his policies and escalated the war in Vietnam. Not wanting to be drafted and go to Vietnam, I joined the U.S. Navy. My first duty station was the busiest military communication facility on the planet, Naval Communications Station, San Francisco. It was a major hub of military traffic. It required me to have a high-level top-secret security clearance. At the time, in 1969, most of the communications to ships were via teletype. I was a certified high-speed code operator and was in charge of the code room for ship-to-shore communications. This primitive yet effective slower form of communications utilized code. It was the only modality to get the signal through adverse atmospheric conditions. I'll never forget a most unusual messages of the thousands I received during the years I worked there. The message was an official authenticated priority level that was classified as secret. It was addressed to the Chief of Naval Operations in Washington, D.C., coming from a U.S. Navy ship reporting its position off the coast of Alaska. As I'm decoding the message, I'm reading that the crew visually witnessed off the port bow, emerging out of the ocean, was an elliptical, unidentified object approximately 70 feet in diameter. It emerged out of the ocean and immediately shot straight up into space. The object was tracked on the ship's radar to be traveling at an estimated 7,000 miles per hour. My next tour of duty was in combat action on the rivers of Vietnam, so joining the Navy didn't keep me out of the war zone. Of the thousands of messages I handled, that one official secret message always stuck with me and seeded my interest in researching this subject. Over the decades that followed, my professional career included that of being a chief broadcast engineer for the most powerful FM station on the West Coast. I was also an ABC newsman, reading the news reports from our teletypes, delivering news from United Press International and Associated Press. For over 13 years, I worked at the Naval Electronic Systems Engineering Center in San Diego on a vast array of the Navy's electronic systems as well as satellite communication systems. All the while, I still continue to look for indications to help explain why these seemingly extraterrestrial-related events are classified and known to our government, but not public knowledge and kept secret. In 1993, I heard of a scientist named Bob Lazar, who was for the first time publicly meeting with a group of researchers outside of Area 51 and talking about his work on highly classified government projects that were reverse engineering extraterrestrial spacecraft. This appeared to hold a key insight to what was happening behind the scenes, so I traveled there to meet with Bob Lazar and these researchers. No recording of this meeting was to be allowed. Nevertheless, I felt it too important not to covertly video record and document it. Decades later, when I uploaded this video to YouTube, the event coordinator who originally requested for no recordings was thrilled that I broke the rules regardless, and the video documented this historic first meeting with Bob Lazar, whose testimony I followed over the decades and has stayed 100% consistent. Little did I know that these meetings outside Area 51 triggered the base to go into a complete lockdown condition. This was revealed in an NRO, that's National Reconnaissance Office, Special Security Advisory Blue Fire document that was distributed to the base personnel. Also happening in 1993, President Clinton, with his interest in the UFO topic, requested of his Associate Attorney General Webster Hubbell to find the answer to two questions. Who killed JFK, and are there UFOs? Clinton also had his CIA director, James Woolsey, look into the UFO matter. But the director of Central Intelligence was denied access. Unable to gain access through his normal channels, Woolsey brought in Dr. Stephen Greer, who was the director for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence, into a 3-hour meeting, where Woolsey stated to Dr. Greer, I know the subject's real. I'm just trying to figure out why the hell I can't gain access to it. Becoming aware of the gravity of the situation, Dr. Greer met with some military advisors who advised him to start collecting witnesses. That Area 51 base NRO security advisory document mentioned previously became leaked. This NRO document was somehow obtained by Dr. Stephen Greer and was presented at a Pentagon meeting in 1997 along with Dr. Edgar Mitchell and Lieutenant Commander Will Miller to the head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson. On this document, it revealed that on the distribution list, unacknowledged special access programs, otherwise known as USAPs, operations listed such as Cosmic Ops and Magi Ops that dealt with extraterrestrial reverse engineering operations such as those that Bob Lazar was working on. When Admiral Wilson requested under his high constitutional authority to be read into these programs, he was not only denied access, but he was threatened to drop the matter immediately or face an early retirement and lose rank. The Admiral was mad as hell, as you can imagine, that he and his high level of authority was being denied access. This is what led the Admiral to tell Dr. Greer, quote, well, as far as I'm concerned, if you can get your people who know about this matter to talk on record, you have my permission to go to the media with this. This group is illegal, unquote. In 2001, despite threats to his life not to proceed, Dr. Greer courageously carried out the Admiral's request to gather witnesses that were willing to talk on record and go before the mainstream media of the world. Dr. Greer had collected not just a handful of witnesses, but hundreds of military intelligence witnesses. 21 of these top secret and other witnesses were willing to go before the media of the world at one of the largest events in the history of the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and give their testimony in each state that they were willing to testify under oath before a congressional hearing before the 22 cameras of the mainstream media of the world. I was one of these 21 top secret military witnesses and felt honored to be a part of disclosing this information as going to be brought out to the people of the world, allowing the scientists in these USAPs to be brought forth before a congressional hearing in order to declassify and release these advanced technologies that have been withheld from humanity. The following brief video excerpts have been edited down for brevity to give you a partial idea of what was disclosed back in 2001. In Dr. Greer's opening speech, he stated that he has briefed many high-level intelligence and government officials that have also been denied access, like Admiral Wilson, to these USAPs, and that they have been hidden from presidential administrations, and that these projects are withholding advanced technologies that could have profound implications for all of humanity.
Members of the press, the American public, and people of the world. We are here today to disclose the truth about a subject that has been ridiculed and questioned, denied for at least 50 years. The men and women who are on this stage and the some 350 additional military intelligence witnesses to the so-called UFO matter and extraterrestrial intelligence can prove and will prove that we are not alone. And I have personally briefed a sitting director of Central Intelligence, James Woolsey, President Clinton's first CIA director. I have personally briefed the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, many members of Congress, members of the European leadership, the Japanese cabinet, and others. And what I have found is that none of them are surprised that this is true, but they are uniformly horrified that they have not had access to these projects. These unacknowledged special access projects are taking in at least $40 to $80 billion per year. And they are sitting on technologies that can change the world forever. It has the most profound implications for the human future, for the U.S. national security, and for world peace. Specifically, technologies connected to UFO and extraterrestrial vehicles, if declassified and used for peaceful energy generation and propulsion, would solve the looming energy crisis definitively, would end global warming, would correct the environmental challenges that the Earth is facing. This is not being debated because it is off the national and international radar screens. It needs to be placed on it, and we are here today to do it. We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns, that they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere. We can prove through the testimony and documents that we will be presenting that this subject has been hidden from members of Congress and at least 2 administrations that we are aware of, presidential administrations, and that the Constitution of the United States has been subverted by the growing power of these classified projects, and that this is a danger to the national security. This is a matter of the most pressing import. It has been ridiculed, yes. I know many in the media would like to talk about little green men. But in reality, the subject is laughed at because it is so serious. I have had grown men weep who are in the Pentagon, who are members of Congress, and who have said to me, what are we going to do? Here's what we will do. We will see that this matter is properly disclosed, and these courageous witnesses, the first 21 of over 100 that we have already interviewed on videotape, have stepped forward to speak the truth.
The first witness, Mr. John Callahan, was head of FAA Investigations Division, where a 747 airline was dwarfed by this massive UFO it had encountered. And they had all this data, which the CIA confiscated everything and swore everyone to secrecy. But the CIA didn't realize that he had backups of all the data, which he brought with him.
The men and women who will speak next will do so in order, beginning on your left. They will introduce themselves. I ask for the media to refrain from questions until each witness has spoken briefly about who they are and what they have personally been involved with or witnessed in their government, military, or government-connected careers. At the end, we will have questions. All of you may ask questions for as long as we can stay here, and we will provide you with all the information that you need. So we will begin now with the first of our witnesses, Mr. John Callahan.
My name is John Callahan. I'm a retired FAA employee. I was the division manager for the Accidents Evaluation and Investigation Division in DC. We let them watch the video. We had all the data there. We had all the printouts that the computer put out. They got all excited over it. When it was all done, the CIA, one of the CIA men told the people they were now sworn to secrecy, that this meeting never happened and this event never happened. When I asked him why, I thought it was probably just a stealth bomber at the time. He says, well, this is the first time that we have recorded radar data on a UFO, and these guys are going to get all excited, drooling over all this data. I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it? And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would panic the public. I'm prepared to go to Congress, to swear before Congress that everything I've told you people and everything that is here is the truth. Thank you.
I'm including my short testimony. My name is Dan Willis. I was in the United States Navy. I held a top secret crypto level 14 extra sensitive material handling security clearance. I worked in the code room at the Naval Communications Station in San Francisco. In 1969, I received a priority message from a ship near Alaska that was classified as secret. The ship reported emerging out of the ocean near port bow, a brightly glowing reddish-orange elliptical object, approximately 70 feet in diameter, emerged out of the water, shot into space, traveling at about 7,000 miles per hour. This was tracked on ship's radar and substantiated. Years later, I worked at the Naval Electronic Engineering Center in San Diego for 13 years. A co-worker who I worked with worked at the NORAD facility. When he first started working at the facility, he noticed objects going on the screens that track everything out in space and in the air, objects going off the scale, doing right-angle turns. When he inquired, his older supervisor advised him that, quote, it was just a visit from one of our little friends. These statements are true. I'm willing to testify under oath before Congress. Thank you. Captain Robert Salas, a missile launch officer at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, had a red glowing UFO with security guards topside with their weapons drawn, where the UFO shut down 10 nuclear-tipped ICBMs. They could have destroyed them all, but they just shut them down to be unlaunchable.
My name is Robert Salas. In March of 1967, I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, as a missile launch officer. I was downstairs 60 feet underground in a capsule monitoring and controlling 10 nuclear-tipped Minuteman missiles. I got a call that morning that they were seeing strange lights flying in the sky. I got another call subsequent to that call, and this time it was a more intense tone in the guard's voice. It was very clearly very frightened. He said there was a bright, glowing red object hovering outside the front gate. It was oval-shaped. He had all the other guards out there with their weapons drawn. As my weapons started going down, one after the other, they went into a no-go condition, what we call a no-go condition. They were unlaunchable. We lost somewhere between 6 and 8 weapons that morning. Within minutes of having received that second phone call of a UFO hovering outside the front gate. We also have documentation that I received through FOA requests from the Air Force outlining the Echo flight incident and including in that documentation a reference to UFOs. I'm willing to testify to the truth of all these matters that I've spoken about this in front of Congress under oath. Thank you.
Dr. Carl Wolf gave his testimony when he clearly saw the bases on the dark side of the moon. He ends his testimony with, quote, I remember going home and naively thinking that I can't wait to hear about it on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope to hear about it tonight. But as you'll soon see, his testimony never made it to the evening news.
Good morning. My name is Carl Wolf, and I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance in the United States Air Force. I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, in mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter project at NASA on Langley Field. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned, actually, to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point, I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. And I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress that what I'm saying is the truth.
Donna Hare worked for NASA for 15 years, and it was revealed to her that NASA airbrushes out all the UFO images before releasing them to the public, and that the astronauts have to keep secret what happened when they went to the moon back in 1969.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Hare, and I worked at Philco Ford Aerospace from 1967 to 1981. During that time, I was a design illustrator, draftsman. I did the launch slides and landing slides, and also projection plotting boards, lunar maps for NASA. And I walked into a photo lab, which was the NASA lab across the hallway. I had a secret clearance, which is not that high, but I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. At the time, I was talking to one of the techs in there, and he drew my attention to a photograph, a NASA photograph. It had a dot on it, and I said, what is that? Well, he drew my attention to it, and I said, is that a dot on the emulsion? And he said, and he's smiling, and he has his hands crossed, and he said, round dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground. And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth, I'm assuming the Earth, because it had pine trees on it, and the shadows of the craft, or whatever it was, were in the same angle as the trees. And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was. But I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, what are you going to do with this piece of information? And he said, we always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public. Another incident, I knew someone in quarantine with the Apollo astronauts. He told me that the Apollo astronauts saw craft on the moon when we landed. And that is what he told me. And he also was afraid, he said that the astronauts are told to keep this quiet. They're not allowed to talk about it. So I do want to let you know that I worked out there for a number of years, and I ran into this. So it's not something everyone knows that works out there for a long time. My boss didn't know about it. Some people that sat right next to me didn't know about it. It's very strange, because I don't know how they can do it, but they can let some people know about it and then others not. I'm willing to testify before Congress that what I'm saying is true, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Clifford Stone was part of a crash retrieval team who had gone on board the craft and interacted with the extraterrestrials. He stated by 1989 the government had already categorized 57 different extraterrestrial species.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Clifford Stone. I was a Sergeant First Class, United States Army. I had a secret clearance with nuclear surety. I could get the clearance that I needed to do whatever it was that was necessary for me to do at the time on special operations when I was called in on those. What I'm referring to here is that I was involved in situations where we actually did recoveries of crashed saucers, for lack of a better term, debris thereof. There were bodies that were involved with some of these crashes, also some were alive. While we were doing all this, we were telling the American public there was nothing to it. We were telling the world there was nothing to it. But the whole situation is, we've set back, we've told the American people that there's no such thing as UFOs. I've been involved where we have recovered these objects. We know them to be of extraterrestrials. In 1969, I had an event that happened to me while I was stationed at Fort Lee, Virginia. We went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. That would be my first exposure to any time that we would be recovering an unidentified flying object. When we went there, we already had people that was already in the facility. We were a backup team, which was supposed to be NBC because there was supposed to be some nuclear materials that was on board this craft. Later on, most people involved were to be told that there was nothing on board it. It was nothing more than just a crash of one of our aircraft. I know better, because I was one of the people that approached it with a Geiger counter to get surface readings. I was the first person to go ahead and see that there were bodies on it. That would be the first of approximately 12 events. UFO crashes are not events that take place every day. They're rare. I know we're not alone in the universe. I know that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. It's evidence that has been denied to the American people. I stand before you today in my almighty God, and I tell you this: if Congress calls me in and says, will you testify in detail what you know, I stand here today prepared and ready to do just that. Governments must never lie to the people.
My question is to Clifford Stone. You said that you had seen aliens on a craft that had crashed. I wondered if you could describe what they looked like.
I could, but it would probably take a whole lot of time. The reason I state that, when I got out in 1989, we had cataloged 57 different species.
Mark McCandlish's associate witnessed 3 hovering off-the-ground flying saucers built back in the 1950s at an exhibit. They were called alien reproduction vehicles. He was able to confirm the exhibit through a congressman's office. He also obtained a military photo that matched the ARV design almost perfectly.
Good morning. My name is Mark McCandlish, and for the last 21 years, I have worked as a conceptual artist for a variety of defense contractors. I've been involved in conceptual artwork or the production thereof for Rockwell on the X-30 program, and also on the HISTEP program. That's spelled HYSTP, means Hypersonic Testbed Program. During the course of my career, I've twice had a secret security clearance. In 1988, in November, a college buddy of mine, an associate by the name of Brad Sorensen, informed me that he had personally witnessed 3 flying saucers at a very large hangar at Norton Air Force Base during the course of an air show that was held on Saturday, November 12, 1988. A male staff member in Congressman Brown's office not only confirmed the exhibit, but the fact that there were 3 discs at that exhibit. These discs were hovering off the floor without any visible means of support. They were referred to as alien reproduction vehicles, also nicknamed the flux liner because they used high voltage electricity. This is a diagram that I made based on a sketch that Brad Sorensen did for me in rough form shortly after he had his sighting, and subsequently cleaned that drawing up and made it much more accurate. And that's the drawing that Dr. Greer is holding there now. Later on, I obtained photographs that were taken in 1967 by a military pilot, Harvey Williams, flying a C-47 for the Air Force at 12,000 feet, approximately 25 miles southwest of Provo, Utah. This particular vehicle matches the so-called ARV in all proportions and respects in terms of the detail of the shape of the craft. And this was photographed, as I say, in June or July of June of 1967. I subsequently obtained a copy of an interoffice memo from Hercules Aerospace that describes a particular type of science involving something called zero-point energy and scalar waves. According to Brad Sorensen, this is the basis of the technology for these anti-gravity propulsion systems. This particular document here describes 6 different meetings involving the Defense Intelligence Agency and cooperative efforts with the Russian scientific community in investigating this, what is called the fundamental enabling technology that was originally discovered apparently by Nikola Tesla in the early 1900s. Anyway, I could provide you much more detail at a later time, and I am prepared to testify in detail concerning these events and their truthfulness before Congress. Thank you very much.
Mark was planning on testifying at the June 2021 Senate hearing on UFO and UAPs, but was unable to due to a shotgun blast to his head in April of 2021 that was ruled a suicide. The timing of this happened only a week after U.S. Air Force intelligence specialist Mike Turber publicly completely retracted and apologized that his earlier 2019 testimony about the well-known so-called Tic Tac that has been heavily promoted since 2017 in the mainstream media as being extraterrestrial was in fact U.S. technology.
And now for a little Tic Tac talk. So when we last had Mr. Turber on the show, he told us that this was U.S. technology.
Which it still is.
Built at Plant 42. And you told us with 100% certainty that this was U.S. technology. Is there anything about that that you would like to amend?
Absolutely. I owe you and your viewers and anyone else that was taken aback by this an apology.
Both of these testimonies would have completely countered the narrative that the U.S. does not have these technological capabilities. Attorney Daniel Sheehan served as our general counsel, showing that the president doesn't have a high enough security clearance. He testified that President Carter, who made it his campaign promise to release the UFO files, was refused by the then Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr.
Good morning. My name is Daniel Sheehan. I'm an attorney and serving as general counsel to the Disclosure Project. I'm a 1967 graduate of Harvard College in American Government Studies and Constitutional Law, and a graduate of Harvard Law School, or 1977, that I was contacted by Ms. Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service. She asked to meet with me, and I met with her, and she informed me that President Carter, upon taking office in January of 1977, held a meeting with then the Director of Central Intelligence, who was George Bush Sr., and demanded that the Director of Central Intelligence turn over to the President the classified information about unidentified flying objects and the information that was in the possession of the United States intelligence community concerning the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence. This information was refused to the President of the United States by the Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush Sr. I'll be more than happy to share the details of what I believe to be the relationship between this off-the-shelf enterprise and the secret government which is concealing this information from the American public. And I am happy and proud to serve as general counsel to the Disclosure Project. Thank you very much.
Dr. Carol Rosin was Wernher von Braun's spokesperson who revealed to her on his deathbed future plans to move forward on their agenda. These planned false flags would be used to fabricate future threats. The sequence of these events started out with the Soviet Union. The next would be terrorists. This was May of 2001. We all know what happened in September. Next would be rogue nations such as Iran and North Korea. Next would be asteroids. And the last card they would play would be extraterrestrials. Lately, we've been hearing a lot of alien threat language in the media.
Good morning. My name is Carol Rosin. In 1974, I was introduced to the late Dr. Wernher von Braun in the U.S., the father of rocketry. In my first meeting with him, during that first 3.5 hours, he said to me, "Carol, you will stop the weaponization of space. And we have to prevent the weaponization of space because there is a lie being told to everyone that the weaponization of space is now first being based upon the evil empire, the Russians. There are many enemies," he said, "against whom we're going to build this space-based weapon system. the first of whom was the Russians, which was existing at that time. Then there would be terrorists. Then there would be third world countries. Now we call them rogue nations or nations of concern. Then there would be asteroids. And then he would repeat to me over and over, the last card would be the extraterrestrial threat. Except that it's all based on a lie. We can end the energy crisis. We can build now non-polluting technologies. Wernher von Braun used to tell me that we could have cars back then that drove around off the ground. He described this to me on beams so that we have no pollution on this planet. And we can end the arms race without dislocating the industry jobs, without disrupting the economy, by transforming, Wernher von Braun told me, the war industry into a global cooperative space industry that will provide, he said, finally, more jobs and profits on this planet than during any hot or cold wartime, more products and services that can be applied directly to solving the problems of this planet. And I will testify before the Congress under oath about everything I have said and more. Thank you.
Dr. Greer explains how through compartmentalization, President Eisenhower lost control to the corporations.
First of all, I think initially there was an appropriate national security apparatus in place in the 40s during the Truman and also Eisenhower years. By the late Eisenhower years, we have a testimony from Brigadier General Stephen Lubkin, still a practicing attorney, that by the late Eisenhower years that he had lost control of these projects primarily because of the compartmentalization into the military-industrial complex. Operative word industrial. There are corporations such as SAIC, Lockheed Martin, Northrop, and others that deal specifically with this issue with advanced energy and propulsion systems connected to UFOs.
Brigadier General Stephen Lubkin witnessed this firsthand, being on Eisenhower's staff.
What happened was Eisenhower got sold out. I think that he realized that all of a sudden this matter is going into the control of corporations. He realized that he was losing control. He realized that the phenomenon of whatever it was that we were faced with was not going to be in the best hands, and those were as far as I can remember, that was the expression that was used. It's not going to be in the best hands, and so it has turned out to be.
Myself, being an ex-ABC newsman with a room packed full of reporters, in my mind I thought, with the public informed, how could this not be a world-changing event? Naively, in 2001, I had no idea what Operation Mockingbird was and how the CIA back in 1950 took control of our media to control the public's perceptions. One of their main tactics they use is called a limited hangout. In other words, edit the information so as to make it appear that they're responsibly covering an event, but carefully limit the information in such a way that it forms a preferred perception in the viewer's mind, while only hanging out a limited amount of information so as not to disclose information they wish to keep hidden. For example, CNN set the narrative, "We are not alone," making this event appear that the hundreds of witnesses were wanting to have a congressional hearing on simply having the public to know that we are not alone with the reality of UFOs. This is what is called a limited hangout. All the other mainstream media followed almost the exact same coverage format in lockstep coordination. An example of this was CNN.
Is there really life on other planets? Some former military and government personnel say they have proof there is. Elaine Quijano explains.
We've seen the photographs and heard the stories of what some say is evidence of UFOs. Now a group of scientists, former Air Force and FAA officials is lending its voice to the argument that we are not alone. Dr. Stephen Greer heads up the Disclosure Project, a group that compiles information from people who say they've encountered extraterrestrial forms of life.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns.
Since 1993, Dr. Greer says he has videotaped testimony from more than 100 people about what they say are close encounters. People like retired Navy Commander pilot Graham Bethune, who believes he saw a UFO 50 years ago while flying to Newfoundland.
Then it appeared over to the right and moved out slowly and flew with us. It was still not at our altitude, but we could see the shape of it. It had a dome.
In addition, the Disclosure Project says it has documents supporting its case, including FAA records and CIA memos.
What do members plan to do with their information? They hope Congress and President Bush take notice. They want to see congressional hearings into the matter, despite criticism from skeptics.
Those that don't want to believe you will never believe you anyway, so it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the truth.
A spokesperson for the Senate Science, Technology, and Space Committee says no congressional hearings are planned right now. Elaine Quijano, CNN Headline News, Washington.
Note that where the rest of the sentence was cut off, in which Dr. Greer continues in the sentence after stopping and making right-hand turns.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour, stopping and making right-hand turns. That they use anti-gravity propulsion systems, which we have already figured out how they work in classified projects in the United States, Great Britain, and elsewhere.
CBS wanted to interview me, and after I saw what CNN did, I made it clear that I'm only willing to do this interview if they promise that I can say that, quote, we have a solution to the energy crisis and are willing to bring forth the scientists, prove before a scientific inquiry board before Congress that these technologies can give free, non-polluting energy, unquote. The producer promised that this would be included in the broadcast.
We are not alone. That's the message a group of pilots, scientists, and former government officials want Congress to hear. Ken Shotnick shows us tonight what some people are calling a UFO cover-up.
I've never seen it. Look at that.
I don't know, but I got it on tape.
A strand of moving light in the sky over Phoenix. A bright glowing streak dashing through West Covina. What looks like a flying saucer tracked on radar over Mexico City. Are these UFOs caught on tape? Dan Willis is a former radio operator for the Navy.
I took personally communications from ships that were reporting the extraterrestrial craft merging out of the ocean and shooting off into space.
He's among a group of scientists, military, and former FAA officials calling for congressional hearings to establish the presence of UFOs and extraterrestrials. 21 members of that group already have testified in Washington for what's known as the Disclosure Project. Dr. Stephen Greer is the director of the Disclosure Project. He's gathered 400 witnesses who say it's time for government secrecy to end.
We can establish through this testimony that these objects of extraterrestrial origin have been tracked on radar going thousands of miles per hour.
It's come to a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people.
They believe a congressional hearing is the only way to set the record straight. The Disclosure Project has its work cut out for it because as of right now, no congressional hearings are planned. For CBS 2 News Special Assignment, I'm Ken.
The only thing I got to say was, we've reached a critical point where the truth needs to be revealed to the people, but that truth was never allowed to be said. After it aired, the producer left a voicemail saying, quote, oh gosh, I don't know how to say this. I had some problems with the piece, and basically the higher executives made me cut that part out, unquote. We know now that the higher executives are tied in with the intelligence community. Note that CBS followed the exact same format of We Are Not Alone and the exact same excerpt from Dr. Greer's speech of UFOs going thousands of miles per hour. In other words, knowing about the potential reality of UFOs and extraterrestrials was permitted to be in the public mind, but not that there were secret and potentially illegal government operations going on and suppressed technologies. Since the mainstream media wasn't getting the message out to the public, Dr. Greer started the Campaign for Disclosure, which I personally joined him in all the major cities across the western states. Being an ex-ABC newsman, I took an interest how the local network affiliate reporters are going to cover these events. And after they interviewed us, Without exception, in every city, they spun and ridiculed the subject matter. In San Diego, they had dancing alien dolls with smoke in the background. In San Francisco, we heard behind the scenes that they were told to make fun of it. So when it aired, it was the Disclosure Project's looking to aliens to solve the world's energy problems. In Portland, Oregon, here's one example of what is called a giggle factor. This is what is used to discredit the subject matter, where everyone laughs and says, UFOs and energies. Let's get on with the big story.
Forum on alternative energy tonight is out of this world, really. The Disclosure Project is a nonprofit research effort that identifies top secret military and government witnesses to UFO and extraterrestrial events. Project members say the government is hiding information about energy sources derived from UFOs, technology that they say could help us here on Earth.
This is an enormous issue where technologies have been illegally sequestered from the public that could completely solve the environmental problems as well as get us off of fossil fuels.
He says these technologies include anti-gravity propulsion systems, zero-point and over-unity energy. Lots of people showed up for that forum. Kurt.
Blazer fans, your long wait between playoff games is almost over. They finally tip off Game 2 tomorrow night.
And the team has returned to Los Angeles, where the Lakers sit comfortably on a 1-0 series lead. Dan Christofferson is in for Tim Becker with a trend that might work in Portland's favor, huh?
I'm doing Kurt's thing here.
Yeah, give me something, please. I'm dying out here.
UFOs and energy. Let's get to the big story.
Let's go to Shaq. He's an extraterrestrial.
There you go.
No
He can solve the world's power problems.
That's right. All right.
In October of 2002, Vice Admiral Thomas Wilson, in a further attempt to discover what is happening in these USAPs he was denied access to, arranged a meeting with astrophysicist Dr. Eric Davis. In this meeting, which Dr. Davis recorded, it was revealed that these USAPs were working with technology, quote, not of this earth. Dr. Eric Davis created a transcript from this recording, and later it became public in 2019. This was brought up at the recent May 2022 congressional hearing on UFO/UAPs by Mr. Gallagher, with high-level intelligence officials inquiring of their awareness of the knowledge of the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident, of the UFO shutting down ICBMs, which Captain Robert Salas gave testimony, and of the Admiral Wilson memo revealing extraterrestrial reverse engineering operations that the Admiral was denied access to. Both of these high-level intelligence officials, who are responsible for UFO/UAP investigative research, on the record denied that they had any knowledge of either case. Here's an excerpt from that hearing.
Mr. Gallagher.
It's also been reported that there have been UAP observed and interacting with and flying over sensitive military facilities, particularly, and not just ranges, but some facilities housing our strategic nuclear forces. One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray, if you've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report, or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
So you've just seen informal stories, no official assessment that you've done or exists within DoD that you're aware of regarding the Malmstrom incident?
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance of the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
Well, I would say, it's a pretty high-profile incident. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. I mean, who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that are out there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our attention.
So how would it have to be officially brought to your attention? I'm bringing it to your attention.
Sure,
this is pretty official.
Sure. So we'll go back and take a look at it, but generally there is some authoritative figure that says there is an incident that occurred. We'd like you to look at this. But in terms of just tracking what may be in the media that says that something occurred at this time, at this place, there are probably a lot of leads that we would have to follow up on. I don't think we are resourced to do that right now.
Well, I don't claim to be an authoritative figure, but for what it's worth, I would like you to look into it. And
Sure.
if for no other reason, you could dismiss it and say this is not worth
wasting resources on.
Will do.
And then finally, are you aware of a document that appeared around 2019, sometimes called the Admiral Wilson Memo or EW Notes Memo?
I am not.
You're not. I'm not personally aware of that. Okay. This is a document in which, again, I'm not commenting on the veracity. I was hoping you would help me with that, in which a former head of DIA claims to have had a conversation with the Dr. Eric Wilson and claims to have sort of been made aware of certain contractors or DoD programs that he tried to get fuller access to and was denied access to. So you're not aware of that?
I'm not aware, Congressman.
In my 10 seconds remaining, then, I guess I just would ask, Mr. Chairman, unanimous consent to enter that memo into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
The next month, in November 2002, a UK computer hacker, Gary McKinnon, inspired by the disclosures of witnesses of the 2001 event, wanted to learn the truth for himself. He is indicted after discovering hidden files of evidence of the U.S. Navy's Solar Warden secret space program in NASA computer systems. McKinnon says he found a log of fleet-to-fleet transfers that listed non-terrestrial officers, as well as an image of a large cigar-shaped spacecraft, and the names of ships such as the USSS LeMay and Hillenkotter. Both of these names, coincidentally, were names of members of the MJ-12 control group. The Bush administration was so upset about disclosing this information to the public that they wanted to put McKinnon in prison for 70 years. A few years later, a media company out of Hollywood asked me to write an article for them on the control of media in regards to the UFO ET topic. Seeing this as an excellent opportunity to answer in my own mind this question by learning how and why this came to be, I gladly accept it. So I started out with an article titled, "Who Controls Agreed Upon Reality Through the Mainstream Media and Why They Fear Disclosing the Truth About the Extraterrestrial Reality." I started to research through history in chronological order to see if history can show a number of indicators and or patterns that are based on testimonies of military and intelligence witnesses, as well as leaked, authenticated, classified documents that together corroborate on this reality for the primary foundational basis of this research. After much research, it became quite apparent that everything that we were indoctrinated to believe about the history of the world through our education system and media was severely altered or purposely incomplete at best. Many people love science fiction because it stimulates and expands our imagination as what could be possible in the future. What I discovered is that the actual hidden truth of the subject matter is far more fascinating than any science fiction movie could ever possibly imagine. Briefly, what I discovered, without going into a long, complex history, the Nazis had developed technological superiority due to the assistance of an extraterrestrial race called the Draco, which led to Admiral Byrd's total defeat in Operation High Jump against the Nazi Antarctic base in 1947. This eventually led to the U.S. government in 1955 during the Eisenhower administration to sign an agreement surrender treaty with the Nazis. The Nazis had infiltrated into the U.S. and created a, quote, matrix of perception to hide their secret operations. They called this plan Weltanschauungskrieg, or translated as worldview warfare. In 1946, the history of World War II in schools was completely rewritten to hide the Nazi escape and infiltration. They effectively infiltrated throughout our entire system, such as intelligence, education, aerospace, pharmaceuticals, entertainment, media, etc. The control of our media and information systems was crucial in order to create this matrix of perception for the public mind. In 1950, Allen Dulles, who was infamous for the Nazi infiltration, began Operation Mockingbird, starting with the CIA paying 400 journalists to form the public's perceptions. In 1954, former Nazi SS officer Prince Bernhard set up the yearly ongoing Bilderberg meetings. Today, the members of the Bilderberg meetings, Council of Foreign Relations, and Trilateral Commission had the top executive positions of the mainstream media that are centrally controlled the narrative that forms the public's perceptions. Starting in 1983, yearly top secret meetings in Sun Valley, Idaho began with the CIA working with the heads of mainstream media to plan strategic consolidation of the then 50 media companies down to only 6 media corporations. Big tech media consolidations such as Facebook, Twitter, Google, Netflix, and Amazon also aggressively purchased independent media for the centralized control of information. Naming a few of the attendees for last year's July 2021 Sun Valley meeting were Bill Gates, CIA Director Bill Burns, Council of Foreign Relations, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, ABC, NBC, Netflix, Disney, Comcast, Viacom, Microsoft, and many more. This centralized control of the narrative is fed to the news reporters across the nation who are repeating what is displayed on their teleprompters that's forming the public's perception.
Controlling exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
So the answer to my question of who controls agreed upon reality through the mainstream media was answered for myself. Then, when you consider the Nazis infiltrated NASA, where the public was led to believe that primitive rocket propulsion was the only means of overcoming Earth's gravity, while a massive amount of funding was being funneled through secret programs that supported the Nazis' highly advanced secret space program. Later, the U.S. Navy secretly and independently developed its own secret space program that launched in the 1980s. The part about why they fear disclosing the truth about the extraterrestrial reality becomes apparent due to the advanced anti-gravitic technology which the Nazis had developed back in 1934, which allowed them to colonize our solar system, starting with the moon in 1942. The U.S. was at least 2 decades behind them and secretly developed anti-gravity by 1954. These advanced technologies, which incorporate zero-point energy systems, if released to the public, would collapse the multi-trillion-dollar energy industries of oil, nuclear, and coal, and would empower the public with clean, renewable energy, which does not serve the deep state cabal that shares common goals and ideologies of the Nazis for a new world order. Since congressional hearings were denied, I volunteered to be a technical advisor and for 10 years traveled the planet, meeting with various scientists and inventors to validate these technologies. Some of the energy inventors I met with had their laboratories cleaned out by SWAT-like teams. Others had been threatened and even murdered. Many we met received national security orders. Since the Invention Secrecy Act in 1951, patent applications can be subject to secrecy orders if the government agencies believe the disclosure would be detrimental to national security. Through a secret system called the Sensitive Application Warning System, applications are withheld having to do with free energy or anti-gravity or a number of other inventions that appear to violate the known laws of physics. Around 6,000 of these patents in this matter have been suppressed from the public. Although there are some brilliant minds on this planet that come up with incredible inventions, just imagine with an unlimited budget and some of the brightest scientists with access to advanced technology of physics that's not taught in our education system, that have alliances formed with off-planet cultures that are thousands of years in technological advancement. Imagine what type of technologies could exist in this type of world. This is the hidden world of the secret space programs. Do technologies exist that can recruit someone on Earth for a 20-year tour of duty in space and then age and time regress them back to their point of enlistment and erase their memory of their service as though nothing ever happened? Since the year 2000, many of these secret space program witnesses are having their memory recall and talk about witnessing faster-than-light transportation, anti-gravity systems, jump gates to teleport you anywhere, medical technology such as med beds that can restore lost limbs, heal any disease, reverse age you, and even add hundreds of years onto your lifespan, and replicators that can create any physical object out of the matrix of space. These are just a few of the technologies the secret space program witnesses have witnessed that I've personally known and have interviewed. The question remains, how are we to bridge these two worlds so that humanity can benefit from these advanced technologies in a way that helps all of humanity rather than keeping them hidden from the people of Earth who are having their perceptions manipulated and deceived instead, unknowingly, toward an agenda that only serves the interest of a deep state cabal whose agenda is to control and enslave humanity and only use these advanced technologies for their own self-serving interests? Can this situation be transformed with enough of the public becoming aware? Dr. Joseph Goebbels, head of Nazi Germany's Ministry of Propaganda, once said, "Propaganda becomes ineffective the moment we become aware of it."